Thank you. And again, thank you for everyone for being here today. My name is Julissa. I am the Director of Programming for the Children's Bereavement Center, and I'll be speaking a little bit about that later on. But we are so excited to have Adam here with us today for today's wonderful presentation. Adam, I just want to tell you all a little bit about Adam. Adam Stevens is a registered drama therapist who works with the queer and POC and neurodivergent youth in transforming their loss, grief, and trauma into an unapologetic, abundant joy and empowerment. Adam serves as the adjunct faculty member in the Creative Arts Therapy Applied Theater program at Antioch University and at CUNY and Marymount Manhattan College in New York. They are the artistic director for the new NYU's Collideoscope Repertory Theater Company, or CRT. And CRT's mission is to advance racial justice and healing through performance. This fall, Adam is set to begin their doctoral studies at NYU's Educational Theater PhD program. Adam is a board member of the National Alliance for Children's Grief, NACG, where much of their work includes bringing a multicultural, social justice, and creative lens to bereavement work. Additionally, they sit on the board of director for the North American Drama Therapy Association as the current president-elect. Adam's superpowers are rooted in the fantastical force of creativity and love. So please join me in welcoming Adam here today. Take it away, Adam.
Thanks, Jaleesa. That was such a wonderful, lovely introduction. So many words, oh my gosh, but that's me. What is also me for accessibility purposes is I'm currently located in New York City. I'm sitting in an office in New York University. This is the land of the Lenape tribe, an indigenous group that was here way before anyone else. And so I want to recognize that. I come to you, an individual who is Black, beautifully so. I'm Black, 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 Black. I'm also queer and non-binary. My pronouns are they, them. I have disabilities, plural, disabilities that you can see, such as my glasses. I need them to see. And then I have disabilities that you can't see, which speaks to my mental health. And why am I mentioning that? Well, there's so much stigma and shame around mental health and diagnoses and such that the way we can dismantle that is by bringing it into the light and out of the darkness, right? Um, I am 5 feet 5.5 inches tall, so that means I am short. I don't live in a small body, but rather I live in a large body. Today, I'm wearing black frame glasses with a black headband, and my hair is up in a top knot with blonde braids. I'm wearing a black shirt, and in the office, there are books behind me on shelves, and the walls are mostly white. And that's part of who I am and how I'm showing up today. I'm also a person who loves to go to the movies. I like to eat good food. I like watching junk TV, and I love going to the beach. So also me, right? Also me. Today, as I begin to share my screen, we're going to be talking about gender, sexuality, grief, and loss, right? Gender, sexuality, grief, and loss. And so as we begin, I want to invite you, wherever you are, to take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to take care of your body. So I recommend just taking one hand and placing it on your heart, and the other hand and placing it on your stomach. And breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And once again, breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Thank you. Next, I want to invite you all to give yourselves a gift. And this gift is the gift of a stretch. Take a moment to stretch your body in any way that you need. I recognize that there are different bodies and different needs. And I also recognize we're sitting in these boxes on Zoom. And so a stretch is most welcome. So take 30 seconds to give yourself the gift of a stretch as we move through. And I'll go ahead and do that with you. There you go. Nice. Feels good. Okay, and welcome. Our community check-in in the chat, I would love if you all would respond to these two questions. The first question, how are you feeling today? As you enter in, maybe you felt some way this morning and you might feel some way later on, but right now in this moment, how are you feeling? And you can answer in whatever way feels right for you. And I encourage you to answer by saying your name. If you want to share your pronouns, you're welcome to, but your name, where you're from, and how you're feeling. And then the second question, what is your goal for our time today together? What is your goal for today? How did you arrive here and why? Why did you arrive here? What are you looking to take away? What are you looking to get from our time today together? So take maybe 1 minute to fill in the chat. I see some responses already coming in. How are you feeling? And what is your goal for our time today? And this check-in is rooted in the sanctuary model, and I always like to give credit where credit's due. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to look at the chat. Beautiful. We have people from all over, which is really exciting. And Jaleesa illuminated that earlier today. We got folks in Miami and Philly, folks in Virginia, Florida, West Palm Beach. This is amazing, amazing, amazing. And so to the two questions, we're feeling great. We're feeling blessed. Heartfelt exhaustion, goal to grasp tools for our youth. Claire says, I am feeling calm. My goal is to gain tools for supporting young people. Jaslene's here says, I feel accomplished from being productive at work this morning. Yes, there you go. My goal for today is to provide my clinical staff with information on grief strategies. Elaine says, I'm doing good today, hoping to learn more about others. Michelle, feeling collected. The goal is to learn new interventions and background that may assist with different communities. Joseph says we're feeling well, learning best practices for care for those grieving loss and trauma. And there's so many more. Keep them coming in. Take time to notice what you yourself is placing in the chat. And please do take time to notice what others are putting in the chat. You know, today we're here together in community. We're here together to have a conversation. We're here together to have a conversation. And that's so very important, you know? This isn't me talking at you, but rather it's an invitation to learn and grow together. I encourage folks to utilize the chat throughout. We're supported by the wonderful staff at the Childhood Bereavement Center in Miami with Jaleesa. So if you need anything, please do reach out and ask for what you need as we move through. Thanks, everyone. And I love that the chat is blowing up and people are still coming in. Thank you so much. So I want to start with this. How do we politicize our work, right? We're here in very many different roles. We have grief counselors and social workers, administrators and the like, and we all come from similar backgrounds and also different backgrounds. So I'm wondering, how do we politicize the work? And this is a bit controversial, right? Because what we're saying is that the body is political, and what happens in the world is impacting our ability to facilitate and hold space for people who are bereft, people who are grieving. And we can't ignore the intersectional identities and locations that are coming into our spaces. So let's discuss frames that are useful in therapy during a climate apocalypse. And when I say a climate apocalypse, I'm speaking to a lot is happening in the world, isn't it? You know, there's wars happening, there's racism, there's homophobia. We're still moving through the evolution of a pandemic that really impacted our world in the most magnificent way. And we know that there's so much more. So it's not just grief. It's not just identity, but it's grief plus identity and all of these things must be considered as we're looking to offer appropriate, as we're looking to offer ethical and culturally considerate care, right? Culturally considerate care. And so when I introduced myself, I said, here I am on the land of the Lenape people. And I am someone who is from an indigenous background. And also, I want to say, if you are not Indigenous, you are living on stolen land, and we need to have appreciation versus appropriation, right? And I know that the Childhood Bereavement Center is located in Florida, in Miami, and so I wanted to just give a map of North America and South America that explores some of the Indigenous backgrounds that were here before others were, right? Very important. Protest therapists, I love this. They go on to say, too many aspiring white allies think racial justice is about diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism. Well, no, 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 sweetie. This is about overthrowing power that benefits you disproportionately, often exclusively. As we enter in, ask yourself, are you ready to sacrifice access, entitlement, and innocence in service of another? That is a big question. That's a really big question. I'll say it again. Are you ready to sacrifice access, entitlement, and innocence in service of another? And here is the white supremacy pyramid. And I think it's a really great illustration of how white supremacy, how bias, discrimination, indifference, how it performs in our world, right? So if we look at the overt supremacy, right, that which is considered socially unacceptable, this we know: hate crimes, burning crosses, racist jokes, the N-word. What intrigues me and piques my curiosity is when we go lower. These are socially acceptable forms of white supremacy and how they're performing in our world today. Take time to take that in. And as we go through, I recognize that some of this, which I'm sharing, can be quite a lot. Take it in. Take care of yourself as you do, but take it in. And think about, people, particularly our young people, who show up with difference and they don't get to step in or step out. This is their experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the entire year. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, she states, when a woman of color doesn't face racism and sexism separately, the sexism she faces is often racialized, and the racism she faces is often sexualized. First things first, intersectionality is not a buzzword, and it is real. No one of us is a monolith. We're not just one thing, but rather we are many things. And when we encounter another, it is our responsibility to engage with all the parts of them, not just the bits and the parts that we want to, right? It's all interconnected. Excuse me, gender and sexuality fluidity. Now, take a moment to take in this question. And I want to know, who feels comfortable to admit they think about their feelings about gender pretty regularly? And I'm going to stop sharing at this point here. And in the chat, we're going to do a little poll, okay? The poll connects to gender and the poll connects to sexuality, right? So 1 to 10. The number 1, I don't feel comfortable at all. The number 10, I feel super duper comfortable, very comfortable. And the first one we're going to put in is this. I feel really comfortable talking about gender identity and gender expression. I feel very comfortable talking about it. Number 1, I don't feel comfortable talking about gender identity and expression. Number 10, I feel very comfortable talking about gender identity and expression. And of course, everything in between. So what I'm going to do is invite you to put a number in the chat to locate how you weigh in this conversation. How you weigh in this conversation. Great. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Ayari, thank you for putting in the Tequesta land. I really appreciate you doing so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as the numbers go, Deborah says a 6, then we have 10, 7, 10, 2, 10, 10, 9, 10, 8, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6, 5, 6. Uh-huh. So again, I invite you to think about what you yourself have put in there and what others have put in there. And how are you in the mix? How do you fall in the mix? Now, I want to talk about sexuality. I feel very comfortable talking about sexuality. That's a 10. I don't feel so comfortable talking about sexuality. That's a 1. And what we know to be true is 1s and 10s, those are on the outsides, but what's in the in-betweens, right? So when I say go, I want to hear from you all with the number. 1, I don't feel comfortable talking about sexuality. You were already going. I see you. 10, I feel very comfortable talking about sexuality. Okay. And folks, here we're seeing 10 and 10 and 6, 7, 10. Beautiful. Thank you. And again, as the numbers are coming through, just take note. Where did I myself place myself? Where are others placing themselves? You know, where is my room to grow and to learn? Because that's why we're here during this lunchtime, right? We're here to lunch and we're also here to learn, right? And so I really encourage us to think about, what is the space where I can grow? How can I learn today? This is where I am now, right? This is the number I selected now. And where do I want to be by the end of the workshop? And how will I take what I learned today outside of my workshop, with my colleagues, with my establishment, and with myself and those that we serve? Okay. We're moving and grooving, everyone. Thank you so much. We're going to go back to our slides, and here we go. Now, this here speaks to breaking the binary, a term made famous by Sonia Renee Taylor, right? The diversity of human sexuality and of sexual orientation. And I really appreciate this one because it very clearly outlines language, which can sometimes be confusing. And in that confusion, there are moments and times when people get hurt. So it's really important that we take time to understand language. Something that someone shared with me many years ago, they said, sticks and stones, they break your bones, right? Words, they hurt your heart. So this is why we're going to slow down just a bit to take it in. And when we think about gender identity, we think about how we think about ourselves. Language commonly used is woman, genderqueer, man. This is how I think about myself. Now, the gender expression is how I express my gender, right? Am I expressing it as masculine, as feminine, somewhere in between? That's the expression. That's how it's demonstrated, the outward presentation. The biological sex, that speaks to what we were born with, the organs, the hormones, the chromosomes. Female, intersex, male. And then we move into sexual orientation. And this is a physical or a spiritual or an emotional connection. So it's not just physical, right? A huge misconception is that sexuality is all about physicality, but no, it's about a spiritual and emotional connection as well. And some of the terms connected to that include heterosexism, bisexuality, and homophobia. And what we're doing, everyone, right now is we're laying the foundation, right? We're laying a foundation around gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality. And then as we move through, I'm going to outline for you how this connects to experiences of queerness, right? Experiences for the trans community, yeah? And understanding ways that we can support. So you'll leave here with some strategies and a deeper understanding as we're helping them to navigate their grief and bereavement narratives. These are some of the definitions outlined a little bit clearer. What is gender? What is transgender? Gender, a state of being male or female, and typically regarded in social constructs rather than physical attributes. Gender is a social construct. Now, when we speak to transgender, it refers to someone who does not identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. I was born female at birth. That's not how I identify. I am trans, right? Cisgender refers to someone who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. I was born male at birth, and that is how I identify. Non-binary. When we speak to non-binary, we're referring to someone who does not identify exclusively as male or female. And guess what? They don't have to. They don't have to. It can be front, back, side to side. It could be outside of all of that. We move to gender fluidity, and that's referring to someone whose gender identity changes over time from one end of the spectrum to the other. So we're speaking about an evolution and a process, them coming into themselves, yeah? And lastly, gender queer connects to someone whose gender identity falls on the spectrum between male and female, very similar to non-binary. Are we ready? Okay, here we go. There's more. Now, I'm not going to outline each of these for you, but just as we had the ones that we previously showed, this is an expansion, right? This is an expansion. And as you're looking it over, what I'll say is this: language is important, and I've mentioned it before, and also language evolves. So terms and language that was used years ago may not be considered okay today. An example that I'll offer is the word transvestite. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, transvestite was a revolutionary and empowering term. Today, it is a term that causes great offense to gender nonconforming, trans, and non-binary folks, right? So offering an example there. Years ago, to say someone was colored was appropriate, and now it's offensive to call someone colored. We say people of color, right? The evolution of language, and it is our responsibility to be aware of what the language is and how we're referring to people, because we're talking about their personhood. We're speaking to their experiences, right? Now consider, what does this look like for you? Your gender identity, your expression. How does this show up for you? And what does this mean for you, right? What does this mean for you? And, for folks who don't think about it often, think about why you don't have to think about it often, right? And for folks who are thinking about it often, there's usually a reason as to why we are thinking about it often, right? Discrimination against female and female identifying folks, right? We're going to be considering gender there. Discrimination against trans or gender nonconforming folks. We're going to be thinking about it because we have to. It's a part of our daily existence. It's a part of our daily experiences, right? Wonderful. So this is Alec Vade Menon, right? They are a poet, they are an artist, they are amazing. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to play a video from Alec and share it with all of you now so you can take it in. Okay. Sorry.
The only way to fight stigma and shame is to shine light on it.
Ask your healthcare provider if Biktarvy is right for you, and visit Biktarvy.com to view the important facts, including important warnings.
At a fundamental level, people still think that you have to be a man or a woman and that you have to look like what society dictates as masculine or feminine in order to be real and worthy and successful. And so much of what I'm trying to do with my poetry and with my self-portraiture is to show people it is possible to live a gender non-conforming life. We're here in Central Park, where I've been spending so much more time now that it's finally warm. It's important to be here and to claim public space. For the trans community, and especially for those of us who are gender nonconforming, we can't even exist in public without being afraid of being attacked. So often people are like, look, if your community is experiencing so much violence, why are you focusing on art? The reason I'm an artist is because we have to create the images of the world that we want. It's really important to understand that when you're a young person who's trans, you don't have control of your body because society, the medical establishment, your school is gatekeeping you constantly. So style really became the only place that I could begin the process of self-recognition. Fashion is powerful. I can walk around in public. If I'm wearing pants, they can say nothing. If I'm wearing a dress, everyone will stare. So I began to see fashion as an extension of my politics. So if I'm just at the diner, wow, we're having a pride march. If I'm just like walking down the street, we're having a pride march. If I'm going to the gym, we're having a pride march. Every time I try to go shopping in a mainstream store, I walk in and it's men's clothes and women's clothes. And I'm like, well, where are the clothes for me? And then I'm in the dressing room and people are like, what are you doing here? So I said, I've had enough of this. I'm gonna start designing my own clothes. And then it became something more powerful. So I wanted to share some of the photos that I recently put out as part of my third fashion collection. I wanted to name each article of clothing after a term that's being used to police trans and gender nonconforming people. I wanted my fashion to sort of interrupt that idea that I'm becoming something I'm not. I'm creating a canon that doesn't exist, and that when people see these images, they can create new possibilities for themselves. When I was a kid in Texas, I just got it all. Like, it was like, you were the wrong religion, you were the wrong body, you were the wrong skin tone, you're the wrong gender, you're the wrong sexuality, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And so Texas was a lesson in self-love by another name. We've still internalized this idea you can't be in the South and be trans. So I started to connect with local LGBT communities across Texas, and together we came up with the idea of throwing a pride in my hometown.
Howdy y'all, welcome to Bryan College Station Pride. So I'm so excited because tonight we have performers who've come in from all across Texas. We have people from Denton, we have people from Dallas, we have people from Austin, from Houston.
I don't care about what they say we should do or how we should act. Let me show you what freedom looks like.
Why did I have to leave my small town in Texas in order to meet other people like me? So rarely do we show up for people who are living in the South.
The 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And when I'm thinking about what I want the next 50 years to be, I want the next 50 years to be about Southern queer power, right?
It's still a very urban West Coast and East Coast phenomenon. But pride needs to actually froth everywhere, and I want to be part of that.
Okay, we find ourselves back. And at this point, I want to open up space. We just saw a video and we learned some new terms, or maybe we were refreshed on some terms we already knew. And I'm curious to know what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're learning right now. What you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're learning right now. You're welcome to write that in the chat. And if you want to come on screen or come off mute, you're most welcome to do that as well, right? You're most welcome to do that as well. And what I'll offer in this moment is this: whenever I open up a question or open up the space, at first people are hesitant, and I understand. But then people get warmed up and then everyone wants to talk, and we gotta move on. So this is a gentle, loving nudge from an Adam to make yourself heard, make yourself seen, speak what's on your mind, and I'm happy to answer any questions that are coming up in this moment. And you can put them in the chat, or you can come on screen, you can come off mute, you can use the raise hand feature. Let's hear from you. We're gonna take about 5-ish minutes to do so. Ayari, I hope I said your name correctly, says, yes, joy through art and self-expression. Yes, yes, yes. Jaleesa says, I saw empowerment and acceptance. Claire says, I love Alec with a big old heart in third gender fashion. Thank you for that. Ayari says, thank you, Ayari. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I saw incredible courage, self-empowerment. Yes, yes, yes. I feel like there's some more. Let's hear it. Let's feel it. Let's experience it. And let's do it together. Does anyone want to come on screen and say, hey, and talk about what they're experiencing so far? Okay. Keep the comments coming. I love it. It's amazingly beautiful. Finding safe spaces, not just on the coast, but in central and small towns too, right? So important, Brianna. And I'm so glad that you brought that in because, you know, in major metropolises, it's a different experience. In some ways, we live in a bubble. That's not to say that there's not discrimination and hate and not a need to learn and to grow. But in smaller towns, it lends itself to more isolation, right? And so the need to recognize and be in conversation, to give visibility and representation to is really important. And so, Brianne, I'm just riffing off of that, yeah? Okay, as we carry on. Pronouns are not preferred. You know, the first individual there says she, her, please. The next one says he, his, please. The last one says they, their, please. And, you know, when we're looking at the images, they might not align with what we think they should be. That doesn't matter. It's about the individual and their experience. And these pronouns, their gender expression and identity are not a choice, are not a choice. So when we misuse them or misgender someone, it's harmful. When we misuse them or misgender someone, it's violent. That is the reception of the folks who are being misgendered. And it's important to have that consideration. Will we make mistakes? Yep, absolutely we will. And I make mistakes all the time. I would be remiss if I said I did not, and I do. But what I do when I do make a mistake is I acknowledge it. I'm accountable for it, and I try my very best to do better, right? What does it mean when someone says, these are my pronouns and this is who I am, and a young person is really clear on that, and they continue to be misgendered again and again and again? I have seen it, and I have experienced it. And it's really hard to witness and to watch. And I feel that we as adults have a responsibility to advocacy, to speak up for the change that is needed in this moment, and to be an ally or a co-conspirator, right, to the young person and say, hey, listen, that's not their pronouns, these are their pronouns. Simple as that. It doesn't need to be contentious, but it's calling in rather than calling out in service of the youth. This is an outline of the current gender pronouns. Here it says normalize asking and stating pronouns. It's really important. You can model that. You know, when you're in a space, say your name and then offer your pronouns after, if you feel comfortable, and an invitation to others to do the same. My name is Adam. My pronouns are they, them. And, you know, even the word normalize there, I need to change that. I do. It needs to be changed to humanize. Because what happens if we're normalizing things, but I fall outside of that? Am I not normal? Am I not included in that? But when we humanize, we speak to making experiences more human, more humane, filled with compassion, in service of human rights. So you've taken a moment to take in the different pronouns, and people will tell you how they want to be called. It's as simple as that. And if they don't know, this is a great way to say, oh, pronouns, and then give a description as to what pronouns are and why we have them, and how that relates to expression and identity. Now, things to avoid. And I love that this is here because if you don't know, you don't know. But you know what? When you know, I feel you all. When you know, right? When you know. So avoid these gendered relationship specific terms, you know? Instead of saying a pregnant mom or woman, say, there's a pregnant parent, a pregnant person. Instead of saying birthing mom or woman, say birthing parent. We don't want to make any assumptions, right? We don't want to make any assumptions. And if someone has a preference or wants other language, they'll let you know. Trust me, they will let you know. Instead of saying dad or papa, you know, co-parent, partner, birth partner. You know, there's a lot of language around motherhood and fatherhood. What does it mean to be inclusive? And say parenthood, right? Parenthood. Language around breastfeeding can easily be transformed into a nursing parent, someone who is nursing. And I know, like, it's like, wait a second, well, that's not the way it's been. Well, you're right. But we're in the here and now. And we're also thinking about how we're going to move forward. And I'm offering these as ways to consider how we can be more inclusive, how we can be more accepting, right? And just the littlest things have the biggest impact, right? Have the biggest impact. Being gender fluid means sometimes I'm a girl. I mean, sometimes I'm a boy. Maybe today I'm both, or perhaps I am neither in this moment, right? And that's all okay. And this next slide here illuminates it, and I love it. You know, today I was talking to my dad and I referred to myself as his son. I'm gender fluid, by the way. And he said, "Today's a Sunday, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Huh, I thought today was a Saturday, not a Sunday." And we just laughed for about 5 minutes. Diversity only makes dads stronger, more powerful. The dad jokes are evolving. I really appreciate this dialogue here. And part of the reason why I appreciate it so much, because in my work, I have encountered this quite a bit. And I remember, you know, a parent, it was a dad, was really accepting and wanted to be a really, really good dad, you know, wanted to really be present for his child. His child was female assigned at birth, and for a very long time used gender nonconforming pronouns, they, them. And he worked really hard to get them right. And he also encouraged folks around, family members, extended family members, friends, and the like, to get the pronouns right because it was important for him. And then suddenly, you know, his child, his young person, was in my office, and they were like, "Adam, it's she, they. It's she, they." Said, "Okay, all right." I received an email from said parent, the dad, and he was like, "Adam, what's going on? I worked so hard for the they, them, and I feel like I was getting it, you know? And I was advocating that everyone, you know, and now she's she, they, and I don't understand." Two things happened here. This was a really great moment. We got to have a conversation around the fluidity and how it's okay that it may change, and we will validate whatever that changes in that moment. We'll also humanize that mistakes may happen, and how do we move from a space of rupture to a space of repair and care, right? And encouragement to have a conversation with his child. You know, I said, "Did you talk to them and ask them, you know, what the change was about to have a deeper understanding?" Because maybe that transparent conversation, maybe that understanding might help you to connect more and be more empathetic. And he was like, "Huh." And he did. And he did. And then I got an email a few days later. "We're working it. I think I get it now." And I said, "Well, we do what we can. And, you know, that you're present and that you care makes all the difference." And so I'm going to say that again for everyone here. Be present. Show that you care. Because these youth who are not just dealing with loss, but they're also dealing with the emergence of their identity in a world that doesn't always accept that. To know that they have someone who cares and who's going to be in their corner, wow, wow. It's so very important, so very important. And I just wish to, I wish to illuminate that so much, right? I wish to illuminate that so much. And as we continue on, we're going to understand why this illumination is so crucial. We're going to understand why it's life dependent. Yeah. So we continue on. And I invite everyone to just take a moment to breathe in. Release. Yeah. And one more time, breathe in. And take a moment to release. Beautiful. I do that thing where I share my screen again. Here we are. These are some terms connected to gender identity and expression that I think are important, and I'm going to go through them with you all right now. Misgendering is when we use the wrong pronouns, right? Dead naming is when, someone evolves into who they are, connected to their gender identity and expression. And along with that becomes a new name, a name that feels right for who they are. And when we dead name, we use the name that was used in the past. And this can be really harmful, really triggering, and it can contribute to gender and body dysphoria, right? Which speaks to I don't feel right in my body. I don't understand and get it. And that causes significant distress mentally, physically, and emotionally, right? Top and bottom surgery. If we're not living in the body that feels right for us, we may consider moving to have surgery that helps us to feel more connected to. And this can connect to our tops, adding breasts or changing it so it looks different, shifts, and bottom surgery, which speaks to some of our genitalia, right? Binding is when we take measures to bind some of our body parts so that we can present in the way that feels really good for us. And that connects to packing and tucking. You might hear young people or individuals say that they're on T. That's a hormone, and hormones are sometimes necessary to support the transition that folks are going through. Trans femme speaks to someone who was male assigned at birth and is moving into their feminine nature, their relationship to their womanhood. And transmasc refers to people who were born female and are moving into their masculine male self. FTM, female to male. MTF, male to female. And transitioning speaks of the overall process, right? It is indeed a journey. And where we start is not where we're going to end in the destination. And once we arrive at the destination, what we know to be true is there will be a new destination, right? There will be a new destination. And this is all part of moving through, right? And understanding the language is just so very important. And I can't emphasize that enough, right? I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay. Did you know, according to Out magazine, less than 15% of teens identify as straight, says a new study. So think about when you were an adolescent or a pre-adolescent, a young adult, that statistic was not this. So empowerment is becoming more prevalent. People are feeling braver to be able to acknowledge and say who they are, to explore and to question, to be curious. Less than 50%, imagine that, identify as straight. Isn't that something? Okay, so we're gonna have one of our pause moments, yeah? And I'm gonna come back to you all, and thank you for putting what you've put in the chat. Thank you so much for continuing our conversation, because again, I want to emphasize that this is indeed a conversation as we lunch and learn, a conversation between me and a conversation between you. So what are we hearing? What are we seeing connected to gender identity and expression? And I'm inviting this before we move into sexuality, right? Before we move into sexuality. So in the chat, or you can come off mute, let's hear what you're holding or feeling. Ayari says, loss in the emergence of an identity. I heard that clearly and boldly. More, we'll take maybe 1 or 2 minutes, 1 or 2 minutes to take a moment to pause. And the reason why I do this is because, if I'm just talking at you the whole time, I'm not engaging you. But when I create space to say, what's on your mind? What's percolating with you? Then we get to have more of a conversation, and we get to hear not just what Adam Stevens is thinking about and talking about, but what others are as well, right? What others are as well. So this is an opportunity for you all, again, to, in the chat, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling in response to some of the information and the materials that are being shared with you?
I have a question regarding pronouns. So I know in this country, it's very common now with our different pronouns, he and him and her and they and them. I was just wondering, as you were going through your presentation, in other countries, if they are as open or fluid, or if the pronouns in the different languages, in Chinese or other languages, are they as I don't want to use the word rampant. Are they out there? Are people using them? Or is it no, because we're not there yet in other countries? I really don't know much about that. So maybe you can address that.
Of course, and Lori, thank you for bringing that in. And so this is what I'll say. This presentation was created for the United States, and themes and cultural considerations that adhere to norms and practices that are happening here, right? I want to acknowledge that. So there is a bit of a bias in the presentation. It's not set for outside countries in that way. And what we know to be true is different countries have different ways of engaging with this. So there are some countries that are very present in the way that we are here in the United States, and there are some countries that are present in a very different way. What I'll say to that is this also is, when I do these presentations, part of my consideration has to be, what are the laws of the land, right? What are the laws of the land? And different spaces hold different laws and legislation. And so that's also important to acknowledge. And in different country, this would be illegal for me to do this presentation, and I can get in a lot of trouble to do that, owning and acknowledging that. So then we're speaking to a level of safety, right? And having an awareness. And this is connected to, and also, if you're traveling and you have a loved one who does show up with difference, we need to learn and understand how that difference shows up and performs in those places so that you can be safe, and you can make the decision like, I know how to be safe in a space and I'm okay to go, or this doesn't feel like a place I want to go and it does not feel safe. Lori, did that respond to your inquiry?
It did, and thank you.
Of course, thank you for asking. We got some more things posted in the chat. Karen says, it truly does not hurt to ask what the individual's preference is when unsure. Michelle says, I think it's important to maintain that empathy and holding open conversation to allow clients to have the ability to open up and share what they are comfortable with sharing, but not forcing them, absolutely, not forcing them to open up with invasive questions, but really allowing them to take the lead in the conversation. Isn't that right? At the end of the day, we're looking for our young people to, as they're discovering and uncovering things, which is a beautiful thing, to guide, to be our guides, to lead us, right? We're not here to ask invasive questions, no, and I really appreciate, Michelle, that you put that in there, but rather to learn and grow together with them and create space where they can feel comfortable and brave enough to be able to do so. Okay, we're going to continue on. Thank you for the conversation, everyone. And so here, the 3 dimensions of sexual orientation. It begins with my sexual identity. How do I label my sexual orientation? My sexual attraction. Who am I attracted to, right? Who am I attracted to? Remember, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, yes? And then sexual behavior. What do we do sexually with others, right? And it's not just one thing, it's all intersectional. And just notice the middle space there, here, where it's all connecting, right? It's all connecting and not connecting at the same time. Different orientations include, and I've outlined them here for you. Orientations are of 2 natures. It can be a romantic or sexual, or of an asexual nature, right? Which means that folks rarely experience an attraction sexually or physically towards another person, right? So there's romantic attraction, sexual attraction, speaking to folks who show up as asexual, right? And validating those experiences and not shaming them. So for example, if someone comes in and we're finding that they're asexual, it's not, oh my gosh, but rather it's having the education and the psychoeducation to say, okay, and validating their experiences and helping them with resources and letting them know that, hey, listen, this is who you are, and that's okay. And that's okay, with compassion and with care. I had a young person who came in, they were male identifying, and they were discovering that they were asexual. And in the high school population where everyone else is coming in and they were, quote, very sexual, and it was a hot topic of conversation much of the time, they felt very isolated and alone, and they didn't feel safe to share that because they thought they were going to be ostracized from their friend groups. They were going to be ostracized in the school. And to be able to come into a space where they were able to talk about that and explore it was really important for them. And it helped them grow in their confidence. As was mentioned, I allowed them to be the guide, and we explored together and we learned together. And they were able to come into their own. And we know about sexuality is it's not stagnant. So that's where they found themselves in that moment. And there was an invitation that in the future it may change. And that's also okay. Similar to pronouns, how we say, you know, Sunday, this was the pronoun, Saturday, that was the pronoun, and that's okay. And we validate that and it's real. This is very similar. And of course, we know there's more. And just giving you a few moments to look over. Okay. Terms to avoid. Bardashe. We use two-spirit. It's no longer okay to use the term hermaphrodite. What we say is folks are intersex, and you might not be able to tell someone's intersex just by looking at them, right? And that's something that a lot of folks who are intersex live a clandestine lifestyle where they don't share, and there's a lot of physical bodily harm that was done, where at birth, you know, the doctors and families said, we're going to make a choice one way or another to ensure that they grow up male or female. And what we have found to be true is this can be really damaging as they are entering into adolescence and adulthood, because that might not be aligned with who they are. And then some of the surgeries that happened at birth are very difficult to navigate and move forward from. Instead of saying homosexual, we say gay, lesbian, bisexual, and all the other terms that I shared with you earlier. Rather than preference, it's not a preference, it's our orientation, it's who we are, sexual orientation. We don't say transgendered or transvestite, trans or trans person. It's not appropriate to say a sex change operation. It's discounting. Rather, gender affirmation surgery. Disorders of sexual development, no. When you say someone's disordered, that makes them feel like they're less than. Let's look into saying intersex. Born female, born male, assigned at birth, and female or male-bodied. Folks would have vulvas, folks would have penises. And sometimes there's just comfort around language. And I get that. And how do we humanize language around sex? How do we humanize language around sexuality and approach our work from a sex-positive point of view? Polyamory. This demonstrates and illustrates different ways that polyamory performs. And I have found, you know, working with young people of all backgrounds, that they are coming in and they are using this language and they are engaging these kind of relationships. We can't avoid it. We need to understand what it means when a young person comes in or when anyone comes in, and this is the language that they're using so that we can connect and attune to in order to support as they're going through their various processes, yeah? These are some additional terms connected to sexuality and gender, taking some time to take it all in. And as we move through, I just want everyone to make sure you're taking care of your bodies. So it's lunchtime, make sure that you're eating. If you need to stand up for a stretch break, make sure that you do so. Attention to our wellness as we move through. So now we're moving into the intersection and adding in grief. We're talking about loss, right? And expanding the definition of grief beyond the heteronarrative and the heteronormative, right? This illustration here comes from Instagram, from a wonderful, wonderful account called Queer Grief Club, which examines and explores and gives space to queer experiences of grief. And grief can be messy and intimidating, beautiful, complicated, aching. It could be all of these things. And the grief experience for queer folks is not the same as the grief experience for other folks. And we're going to look about, right now, we're going to look into why that is, right? Why the grief experiences are different for different cultural identities. So what can we do with this information? Well, you can update your intakes form to be more inclusive. You can ask about pronouns, add to your pronouns to your email signatures in your email, have gender neutral bathrooms. You know, I'm thinking of young people who come in and they're starting to explore who they are and find out who they are. And then the bathroom that they had been going to doesn't align with who they are becoming. And it's very distressful. But when we have neutral restroom signs, it enables and allows for young people to be able to move into a space that feels more them, and they don't hold such anxiety and distress around having to use the restroom. Confidentiality, respect it. Respect confidentiality. With our young people, you know, they may say something to you that they haven't said to their parents yet because they're not ready, and they're using us to test it out, right? So it's like, wait a minute, you were here because you're experiencing a loss, and okay, but now this is coming up because, you know, loss is a profound and big experience, right? And so inevitably, they're going to feel connected to us in the way that we are supporting them. And along with that, they're going to, at times, share some really intimate, delicate, vulnerable information. And it is our responsibility to hold that with care and to help them navigate where to share that and where not to share. Because what we know to be true is if we share certain information, there can be really big consequences. And so safety is crucial here, right? Trying to maintain the safety of our young people. Giving visibility, you know, hanging pride signs, having resources that are diverse, right? Having resources that are diverse so folks can see themselves represented. Update your non-discrimination policies, right? So that this way it's inclusive of the LGBTQAI plus experience. Lastly, apologize and move on. Don't linger. When we linger, we're making it about us. When we apologize and move on, we're taking accountability and saying, okay, let's move on. And if a person's not ready to move on, they need more time to process, they will let you know. They will let you know. Okay. Nope. So here we are. And I'm wanting to check in with everyone. We are countdown about 30 minutes. How are we finding ourselves? What's coming up? So once again, in the chat, I encourage you, we have about 40 people here, almost 40 people here. So what's percolating in the chat? Let us see. A cultural responsibility, disenfranchised and collective grief. You know, racism and transphobia, homophobia, other forms of oppression and discrimination influence how we grieve. And the types of support that are accessible and needed. And when we're speaking to disenfranchised grief, we're speaking to grief that is connected to my marginalized identity, to the marginalized identities of our youth, be it because of their abilities or disabilities, the color of their skin, their immigration status, their gender identity expression, their sexuality. When we speak to collective grief, we're speaking to community and affinity. This is a grief I'm experiencing. I may not know the person who was lost, but I know that there is something that we were connected to, and therefore, as a community, we find ourselves grieving. And then we say their name. Next, Benedict was a gender nonconforming youth who found himself in a restroom was bullied and beaten up. Subsequently, they committed suicide. It's time to name loud and clear that queer youth are some of the highest population who consider suicidal ideations suicide. And part of our work is to work with so that we reduce that number, reduce that statistic, and yet here we find ourselves. Forgive me, my slides seem to go away, so it'll be back in just a moment.
Sarah is the IT painkiller, remote monitoring and management, remote access, help desk and ticketing.
Vigils being held across the nation for an Oklahoma teenager. Next Benedict was a non-binary student who died days after a fight in a high school bathroom.
And tonight, a ceremony was held to memorialize Benedict at the Stonewall Inn. Kendall Green was there and talked to people about why their story is important for the LGBTQ community.
Hundreds gathered at Stonewall, flooding the streets Monday as they shouted the late Oklahoma teen's name. Benedict! Next Benedict! Shouting shame following Next Benedict's death, joining communities across the country in vigils in honor of the non-binary student who got in a fight with 3 girls while in the bathroom at their high school. The trio reportedly attacked Benedict, sending the teen to the hospital for pouring water on them.
We felt like we needed to stand up and address what happened to Next Benedict.
On February 8th, a day following the fight, the teen showed troubling health concerns, prompting Benedict's return to the hospital where Benedict would die.
I feel doubly connected to the moment. I have students who are struggling.
Well, I just received a message that you can't see the video. I want to check in. Are you all able to see the video?
No, Adam, we can hear it, not see it.
Mm-hmm. My apologies for the technical difficulties. Please bear with me for one moment. Thank you.
Hearing it was good for us as well, Adam, if it doesn't show.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
To figure out who they are in this world.
A preliminary autopsy says Benedict's death wasn't a result of injuries from the fight, though police warrants suggest they were pursuing charges for felony murder in the teen's case. Among Monday's massive showing of support, teachers like Carla Kelly sharing her sympathy for the teen.
When I heard about the news, I thought about any one of my students.
Now, as much as the vigil was to join other communities across the country in honoring Next Benedict, it was also to take aim at political legislation both in New York State and other states regarding the well-being of teens like Next.
There's no coincidence there that Oklahoma passed an anti-trans bathroom bill in 2022.
Oklahoma's governor signed the bill into law requiring public school students to only use the bathroom of the sex listed on their birth certificate. While in New York, demonstrators highlighted Senate Bill 1532, taken up by the Education Committee in Albany, which requires the Board of Education to establish policies regarding the treatment of transgender or non-binary students in every school district.
These people are supported. These people are loved. There are many people that support them and will continue to speak on their behalf.
Kendall Green, Fox 5 News.
Okay, a beautiful demonstration of what it means to be in our collective grief. Did I know Next? No. Did the young people I work with know Next? No. But when that news came out, we were impacted as a community, and we took some time to sit with it and to talk about it. Because we needed to, we had to. And having the space to be able to do so was really important because we didn't have to sit with it alone. We got to sit with it together in community, in affinity, and that was really important. So here are the Uncanny X-Men, right? A famous comic book from the 1960s, which has evolved today, and it explores a group of humans who during adolescence realize that something is different about them. And they can't control it no matter how much they want to. And because of this, a lot of things happen, and at times they are asked to leave their homes. They're discriminated against because of this difference. The metaphor in the X-Men is called mutants. That's how they name, that's the nomenclature for their difference. The connection to queerness is profound. And in this next video, I want you all to think about the experiences of our young people, what it means when they have to come out and what they lose, which speaks to the non-death experiences of loss. I have come out the closet and I'm asked to get out of my house. I share with someone that I'm trans and I'm no longer welcome there. The loss is profound because I lose my home. I lose my biological or born family. I may be housing compromised and have to engage in activities as a youth in order to survive. Subject myself to things that are unimaginable in order to survive. And these are their experiences, right? So loss is not just death related, but loss speaks to other ways of feeling that sensation as well. And I want you all to take a moment to just view this short scene, which illuminates that a little bit more clearly, yeah? And here it is. Can you see it? Just double checking.
Yes.
Great. Here we go.
So, when did you first know you were
a mutant?
But you cut that out.
You have to understand, we thought Bobby was going to a school for the gifted.
Bobby is gifted.
We know that. We just didn't realize he
We
was...
still love you, Bobby. It's just this mutant problem is a little...
What mutant problem?
complicated.
What exactly are you professor of, Mr. Logan?
Art.
Well, you should see what Bobby can do.
I can do a lot
lot more than that.
Ronnie? This is all my fault.
Actually, they discovered that males are the ones who carry the mutant gene and pass it on, so it's his fault.
And so that was a clip from X-Men 2. And fun fact, Sir Ian McKellen, the actor who played Magneto in that movie, helped to co-write that scene, rooted in his experience as a queer man, because he wanted it to be impactful and really reveal the truth about what it means for young people who are different to have to be in relationship with their families and some of the things that happen because of that. And so what we saw was a young man who had difference. He came out to his family, and it was viewed as a problem. And he was no longer able to stay, right? That was very clearly stated, very clearly stated. And so as we continue on, these are the considerations that go into it. And those considerations are of non-death related loss. And why am I speaking to this? Because we need to think outside the box here, right? We need to be able to bring in all kinds of loss that's occurring so that this way we can support the queer youth in their journeys, in their grief narratives, and their narratives of loss. So now I'm going to talk about some considerations that we can use, and also some of the barriers that are connected as well. We're about 15 minutes out, and I want to make sure that we leave some time in case there are any questions, or and also pass it off to the Childhood Bereavement Center for some special announcements that they have at the end as well. So barriers to building queer affirming bereavement spaces. So binary mindsets. It's this way or it's that way. There's nothing else. There's no in between. We need to think from the middle. It's not black or white. It's not right or wrong. It's not always woman or man or male or female. There's encouragement to think about the middle space, because that's the space that we get to grow. That's the space that we get to learn. Lack of education training communities. So grateful to the Childhood Bereavement Center for having me come in today to talk about this, because there are a lot of spaces that aren't talking about this, right? So my hope is that after we have been through this time together, this 90 minutes or so, you will consider maybe just a bit differently. And that will shift some of the practice, yeah? The barrier of safety and trust. What does it mean to possibly be reported and questioned? Do I feel safe? If I come to you and I come out to you and you go and tell my parents or an administrator or someone else, that puts me in jeopardy, right? There's a lot of questions around, well, parental consent. You know, what is our responsibility to parents and families when a child is exploring their trans identity or their queer identity? And the onus is to support the child so that they are safe, as I've mentioned before, to be able to create a space where we can call people in and have the conversations that need to happen with families. And we know that for some of these families, that's not going to be a safe conversation. It can cause significant rupture, right? It can cause significant rupture. Grieving a sweetheart, you know, when young people have that first love, oh, it's so magical. And in the work that we do with young people, as we see the first love, we also see the first heartache, the first breakup, and validating that experience and supporting it and giving resources to move forward is really important. To ignore it is harmful. To act like it doesn't exist or it didn't happen is harmful. Allies and co-conspirators, right? So ally, as we know, is someone who is going to be there no matter what. They're willing to give away some of their privilege and service and support of those that they are working with. So it's important to recognize our privilege and use it for good. We get to ask important questions that are educated, and we get to do the work outside of here. This work can be messy. This work can be uncomfortable. So humanizing that this is going to be messy and it's going to be uncomfortable. Try to stay away from performative activity, virtue signaling, which is usually connected to our own need to show people how woke we are. And that is very dangerous. And it's not in service of the youth, it's in service of us. And to be thoughtful around that's super important. Advocacy, I said it before and I'll say it again. How do we speak up for the underrepresented? How do we speak up for our youth who show up with difference? How do we speak up for our queer and trans youth? We have the power in the space to do so in team meetings, right? Through our intake forms and our policies, our culture, do that. And we need to be considerate on how we do that. And any change is going to be turbulent and it's going to take effort and work. And guess what? These youth are worth it. These youth are worth it. Follow the lead of your LGBTQ peers. And as I say that, just because one of your colleagues may identify as queer doesn't mean that they need to be the ones to do all the things, right? We call that cultural taxation. So it's about creating safer spaces. Create queer affirming spaces to support youth and their families. Listen to a youth, and then listen again. Find ways to offer choice and agency for queer, so queer youth can feel empowered. Creating space for change and reflection and feedback is essential. Joy can be the greatest elixir to grief, right? I say it's the greatest FU to those who want to keep you down in the darkness. So just because someone's coming in and they're grieving or they're bereft, or because someone happens to be queer, part of the LGBTQAI plus community, that does not mean that we don't have joy. And we need that balance. We need to be able to appreciate the joy along with the other bits, the trauma and the grief as well. Understanding history, folks, right? And how can we use that as a tool, a projective, to support the healing and the growth? Understanding the history of our ancestors can help promote us into our future. And remember, you know, queer folks aren't just queer in the month of June. They're queer all year. So there should be resources and opportunities all year long. Correct people if they misgender someone. If someone is misgendered, they may not feel comfortable or safe to make that correction. But if you feel comfortable, you can put yourself out there in service of them. Makes a world of difference. If you hear people using language that's not okay, call them in and say, hey, listen, that's not okay. And we are better than that. Upholding diversity in the workplace and changing the signature in your emails, or adding to, rather. And then show support, making sure that there's materials that represent queer communities and communities of difference. Okay, we're coming to the end now, and so I want to create some space to ask any questions or add on any thoughts that you may have, and thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. So for our final moment before I pass it back to Jaleesa and Deborah and the crew, what's on your minds? What are you taking away with you? Deborah says that being in Florida can be difficult to support youth in so many ways. You mentioned in an earlier slide at certain organizations, especially public schools. Do you have suggestions on how to support students in a safe way for all? So in the clinical space, you know, there's the HIPAA, we have confidentiality. So holding that confidentiality, as was mentioned, is crucial and it's key. And then working on a plan and assessing the situation in a scaffolded way, right? So youth comes out and gets to present who they are more thoroughly, more authentically. Have the conversation, you know, how do you feel about talking to your family about this? Would that be okay? Would that feel safe? Always protecting the students. And also, there are laws there, right? So we need to be considerate of that too, because, you know, I don't want anyone here to do something where they find themselves, you know, in trouble or getting their licensure taken away, their inability to continue teaching and supporting youth in this way. So make sure that you're familiar with the laws and legislation and continue to support the youth. And if a situation make these decisions alone, you can make them in community and collaborate with the youth too. So this way it's a comprehensive conversation that's happening. Thank you for that comment. That was really important. And I know a lot of people, I get that question a lot. So I'm really grateful that you brought that in, Deb. Thank you so much. Michelle says, taking away a lot of new education on terms and incorporating new protocols in the workplace to establish more options on inclusion. Denisa says, you have a very therapeutic voice. Your clients are lucky to have you. Thank you. Thank you for your time and education. Very informative presentation. So in the chat, for the final time, I'll just invite everyone, a word or a short phrase. What are you taking with you from our time? And some folks have already started to do so, but I'm curious to know what you're taking away with you at this time.
I have a question, please.
Hey there.
Hi there. My question is probably two questions. As I'm listening to you and you talked about the different terms, I'm thinking about this as with youth, being around youth, terms and terminology changes quite frequently. So I'm thinking about like in the IT field where trends change every 6 months to a year. How then do you get the information of what the appropriate terms are? Where do you go to seek those terms? That because these are the terms now, they could change in a year. They're new terms. How do you find that out? So these are the things that I'm thinking. And how often do you kind of update? Are there courses out there to update yourself on the new terminology that's being used? These are the things I've been thinking about.
KB, great question, and thank you. And my response is always, we should always be seeking information and learning and growing. The Human Rights Campaign is a great website and organization to go to because they're always continually updating their information and their terminology around difference and what that looks like. Talking with youth is very important. They will tell you, and that's why I love youth, particularly adolescents. They tell you what language we should and should not be using. They keep us accountable in that way. Queer colleagues are also a good resource to go to. And again, it's not about exploiting that information, but rather sharing that information and then doing your own research. It takes work, right? It takes work, and we have to constantly continue to update ourselves around this. I'm constantly continuing to update myself around this. I had youth members talk to me and say, Adam, that's not appropriate. And it's like, oh, and I love when they call me in because then we get to have a conversation around what that looks like, and we get to grow together, right? I'm not saying that this is easy in any way, shape, or form, but I'm saying that we do have a responsibility to our youth, particularly our youth who are marginalized and disenfranchised, to do the work so that this way they feel supported and they feel seen. And it's not about them doing the work, it's about us doing the work in service of them. Did that respond?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're at 2 minutes, so I'm going to pass it over back to, hey.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. That was incredible. So I had the privilege live and in person. And at that conference, I said, I'd love to bring you in to CBC to do something online. Adam promised me online was just as powerful, and Adam, you delivered. So thank you so much. The only sad thing is I can't give you a hug, but hopefully I can see you soon to do that. Yes, I could do that. But thank you, Adam. That was so important. And I there's so many points that you touched upon, but we're Children's Bereavement Center and Live From Loss programming for adults. And we at our, at our mission, look at us. Why would CBC do that? Why? Because we all need to do that. And I asked the question about Florida because I know how difficult it is for any of you who are in Florida, and I think people are from other states too, how challenging it can be in certain environments. And really, there are a lot of allies in the community, and we must be together as we're supporting young people and each other. And very critical that we do have these conversations 365, talk about that all the time, because Pride should be 365. And we on purpose did not do this in June for that reason. We're close, but it's also Mental Health Awareness Month. And Adam and I worked a lot together with mental health. And this is critical for our young people, for adults. So thank you so much, Adam. That was amazing. And just a quick, you don't know what CBC is. We are a grief support organization for those who've lost a loved one. We provide free grief support to children, teens, and adults. And I want to point out to everyone that we have a training that goes through becoming grief informed. And the goal is for all of our partner organizations, not just in South Florida, but around the country, to be grief informed. And our hope is to continue to expand our grief support groups, not just amongst those that we currently have. And we are talking to our LGBTQ+ partners in South Florida to be able to do that. So thank you, Adam. I can't wait to see you again. Thank you all for being here. And I know we're at time, so I appreciate it. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Quick question, Deb. Folks asked about the presentation. If I'm to mail it to you and Jalissa, will you be able to send it out to participants today?
Yes, absolutely. And if I didn't introduce, I'm Deborah Elbow-Steiger, CEO of Children's Bereavement Center, she, her pronouns. I think I just jumped in because Adam knows who I am, but maybe some of you don't. We will get that out to you. Julissa will definitely get that out. Thank you, Adam, for that point.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and happy spring and summer. Thank you so much, Deb and Jalissa, and thank you, Childhood Bereavement Center.
Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.